before, or is this your first time?
No, this is my first time.
Oh, your first time?
This is my
I
first
thought it
time.
was maybe okay.
No, because I know.
Didn't know it existed, or-
No, I know.
Okay.
They're very
Right,
reputable.
you just hadn't been there before.
Yeah. I know many cool places, many cool people in
Yes,
Jogja,
sure.
but just have no time to actually.
Busy life, I get it. Do you have kids?
Yes, 13 years old.
Okay, so yeah, that's
But I'm
probably.
driving him everywhere, so that's also.
Well, I've got two kids a bit younger than that. I can look 5 and 8. So still not babies, but yeah, not teenager yet. Yet.
Yep.
Feels quite close though. The older one, he's got a lot of attitude. He's only 8, it's like, my God, what are you going to be like when you are 13, you know? Anyway,
Gonna be just like their parents, no?
maybe. Let's see. Yeah.
Ini pinjam sebentar. Oke, satu aja. Cek, cek. 1, 2. Silahkan teman-teman yang masih berada di luar bisa mengambil tempat di dalam. Di luar juga tidak apa-apa. Cek, cek. Yang mau pesan silahkan. Oh iya, untuk teman-teman yang duduk di belakang silahkan maju di depan saja, nggak apa-apa. Sampai sini juga nggak masalah. Iya, nanti supaya yang di belakang itu bisa masuk ke dalam juga gitu. Jadi tempatnya masih lenggang gitu ya. Nggak apa-apa, di sini isis kok ini. Ada apa namanya? Ada kipas angin. Silakan teman-teman agak maju satu sap gitu. Atau yang baru datang boleh mengisi yang depan. Sini Kak, di depan. Silakan. Sebentar. Silakan diisi dulu. Misi.
He's scared of you or something. Scared of us.
No, they come here because of you. So
Masih bisa. Silakan. Misi.
You know a lot of people? Oh, you see that?
Oke, cek, selamat malam. Mati. Cek, selamat malam teman-teman semuanya. Bonsoir, bienvenue. Kat sik no deliver. Jadi malam ini adalah malam buku yang ke-86 yang dilaksanakan di Warung Sastra. Tepuk tangan dulu buat teman-teman semua yang membuat acara ini ada gitu. Oke, malam ini kita akan membicarakan satu buah buku yang baru diterbitkan oleh margin kiri. Buku ini sangat bagus. Saya sudah membacanya sampai halaman 210 kalau nggak salah ya. Kalau 214 itu bagus banget. Yang ditulis oleh Antony Loewenstein. Beri tepuk tangan pada Antony Loewenstein. Ya, buku ini tentang bisnis senjata Israel yang melanggengkan neokolonialisme di seluruh dunia. Jadi ini tidak hanya tentang senjata, tapi nanti tentang apa itu neokolonialisme yang masih berlangsung sampai sekarang. Dan malam ini kita sudah kedatangan Antony Loewenstein sebagai pembicara dan dimoderatori oleh Ibu Diah Kusuma Ningrum. Tepuk tangan buat Bu Diah. Salah satu pengajar terbaik di UGM. Di fakultas apa, Bu? Visipol. Ya, fakultas Visipol. Oke, saya bacakan saja hari ini ya. Acara ini disponsori oleh margin kiri. metafor.id, Klub Buku Yogyakarta, Antariksa Journey, Bunker Space, Warung Sastra, Kidung Pena, Klub Filosotoy, dan Suku Sastra. Acara ini dilaksanakan di Blunyarjo, Karangwaru, Yogyakarta, Warung Sastra, jam 19.30 di sini. Tapi nanti kita mulai jam 20.00 sampai selesai. Teman-teman yang akan bertanya silahkan nanti setelah ada penjelasan dari pemateri dan juga moderator, nanti teman-teman pasti bisa bertanya. Dan kalau mau berbelanja, silahkan teman-teman bisa beli bukunya di sini dengan harga Rp126.000 dan juga bisa beli minuman. Untuk makanannya masih kosong karena bukunya pulang. Oke, supaya tidak berlama-lama karena pemateri sudah datang semuanya, sebelum acara ini dibuka, ada satu buah penampilan biola dari saya sendiri. Ya, misi 5 menit saja.
Yeah. This is gonna play.
Great.
Oke. Lagu ini baru saya pelajari hanya 2 hari yang lalu ya. Saya cek-cek di YouTube itu ada anak-anak kecil Palestina itu ya sedang menyanyikan lagu ini. Jadi judulnya saya kurang tahu apa, nanti saya cari lagi ya, nggak apa-apa. Yang penting hari ini kita mendengarkan itu. Oke. Baca ya. Oke, selamat datang. Silakan dimulai acaranya. Tepuk tangan buat Budia dan Antony Loewenstein.
Oke, selamat malam teman-teman, gimana kabarnya? Ini tadi agak cemas karena cuaca
hujan dan segala macam, ada yang datang nggak ya, ternyata full house gitu. Jadi terima kasih banget acara ini seperti yang tadi dibilang nggak akan terselenggara tanpa teman-teman semua. Selamat datang di Warung Sastra di Malam Buku Laboratorium Palestina. Ini buku yang bahasa Inggrisnya diterbitkan oleh penerbit kesayangan saya, Verso gitu, dan terjemahan bahasa Indonesianya diterbitkan oleh penerbit kesayangan banyak orang yang ada di sini, yaitu Margin Kiri. Dan tentu saja istimewa diskusinya karena hadir langsung penulisnya, yaitu Antony Loewenstein. Hi Antony, welcome to Warung Sastra. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yep, and like we have a full house.
Full house. Thank you all for
Yay.
coming. Yeah, let's have a round of applause for yourselves.
Yes, I think you're the ones who really deserve
Exactly.
a round of applause. Jadi sesi malam ini tadi dipesan oleh panitia 2 bahasa gitu. Saya akan pakai bahasa Indonesia, Antony akan pakai bahasa Inggris, teman-teman nanti pakai bahasa apa saja yang bisa kami pahami gitu ya. Jadi jangan pakai bahasa yang, aduh ini apa nih, harus pakai Google Translate gitu. Jadi bebas aja, nanti kita ngobrol. Dan may I start by reading this short introduction of yourself. Saya juga baru kenal Antony malam ini, jadi secara formal kita kenalan lewat biografi singkat yang ada di bukunya ini. Antony Loewenstein lahir di tahun 1974, adalah jurnalis investigasi independen dan pembuat film dokumenter. Ia telah menulis untuk The New York Times, The Guardian, The Washington Post, Al Jazeera English, The New York Review of Books, serta menjadi kolumnis bulanan untuk Middle East Eye. Pada tahun 2021, ia mendirikan Declassified Australia bersama jurnalis investigasi Peter Cronau. Buku tunggalnya yang lain adalah Disaster Capitalism, Making a Killing Out of Catastrophe tahun 2015. Selain diterjemahkan ke banyak bahasa, Palestine Laboratory juga ia garap menjadi serial dokumenter bersama Al Jazeera English, memenangkan hadiah pada Telly Awards dan masuk nominasi Wolseley Documentary Award 2025, penghargaan jurnalisme terkemuka di Austria. Nah, itu perkenalan formalnya. So can we know a bit more about yourself beyond what's formal here? So please, Antony.
Of course. So I think the best way, the book opens with, the book is mostly about the laboratory in Palestine, which we'll get to in a minute, of course. But what I talk about at the beginning of the book, just for a short period, is a little bit about myself, which I'll summarize. I was born in Australia, you can probably tell my accent. I was born into a Jewish family. I was brought up in a fairly traditional Jewish home. And it was just expected in a way that I would support Israel. This was something that many Jewish families then, and I would say still now, simply say is what is necessary. And the explanation or the justification for that was because most of my family were killed in the Holocaust by the Nazis. The ones who escaped came to Australia and England and America and elsewhere. And the argument was that if there was some horrific similar Nazi-like regime that appeared in the world, we would be safe in Israel. And for those who don't know, if as a Jew, if I go to Israel tomorrow, and I have spent time in Israel, but I'm not a citizen, just to put that very clearly on the record, but as a Jew, I can go to Israel tomorrow and I can become a citizen within 3-4 months. Whereas a Palestinian, who in my view has much more connection to the land, cannot do the same thing. So that's why many years ago I decided that I did not want to become an Israeli citizen, because it seemed to me inherently discriminatory and immoral to get something that Palestinians cannot. So I've been a journalist for over 20 years. I guess you've read my brief bio, so I don't want to, should I say nothing until you want to translate or not? Okay, I mean, I don't know how many people are understanding, I'm not really sure, but okay.
Okay, but we're also live on YouTube,
Yes,
so
yes,
probably folks at home would love to have a bit of Bahasa Indonesia summary, if that's
Please.
okay with you. Jadi Antony lahir di Australia di sebuah keluarga Yahudi, dan sebagai keluarga Yahudi gitu dia otomatis dibayangkan mendukung negara Israel, dan ini karena sejarah mengerikan Holocaust dulu gitu ya. Dan sebagai seorang Yahudi dia bisa pergi kapanpun gitu ke Israel, besok gitu juga langsung bisa, dan dengan sangat cepat 3 bulan dia bisa menjadi warga negara. Dan buat dia ini miris karena ada orang-orang Palestina yang tinggalnya jauh lebih dekat dengan wilayah itu, mereka nenek moyangnya tinggal di situ, sempat terusir dan segala macam, mereka nggak akan pernah menjadi bisa menjadi warga negara Israel gitu. Jadi tadi dia menggarisbawahi, I want to make it clear gitu kan, bahwa dia bukan warga negara Israel dan dia tidak ingin menjadi warga negara Israel karena tadi ketimpangan yang ada, orang yang di situ aja nggak bisa, tapi kenapa dia bisa.
And one of the things that I wanted to say was, and this is probably a common view in Indonesia and a lot of Muslim countries, is that all Jews support Israel. This is not true. There are many Jews who do support Israel, that's true. But there are growing numbers of Jews, mostly younger Jews, younger than me, who do not support Israel, do not support Zionism, oppose what Israel is doing, oppose the occupation, oppose the genocide in Gaza. This is not 3 people, this is a sizable number of Jews in America and England and Europe and Australia. We are a growing minority. And in the last 2 years, after October 7, after Israel's or continuing genocide, there has been, I would call it, an awakening amongst, millions of people around the world, not just Jews, of course, to the reality of what Israel is. Israeli behavior, a desire to control, and I would argue ultimately remove Palestinians from Palestine, whether it's in Gaza or the West Bank. So I guess I've gone on a journey of sorts. From years ago, I was never waving the Israeli flag, it was nothing like that, but certainly I had to learn myself, because I was not getting this from my family, what Israel was, what it stood for, and why I wanted to oppose that I do not think that it's a Jewish value or a human value to support occupation.
Jadi meskipun dia keluarga Yahudi, dia ingin menggarisbawahi bahwa sekarang semakin banyak orang Yahudi, terutama yang muda-muda gitu, yang secara terbuka menentang Israel, menentang Zionisme, menentang pendudukan terhadap Palestina dan juga genosida yang ada di sana. Yang ingin digarisbawahi Antony tadi adalah nggak ada tuh yang ngajarin dia soal macam-macam di luar ini ya, propaganda tersebut. He had to learn and unlearn, if I may add. Harus belajar sendiri dan belajar ulang gitu ya, soal aneka hal yang dianggap itu pengetahuan otomatis gitu buat teman-teman Yahudi.
Yeah. Yep. And I suppose I would say, just before we talk about the book, is that I today, and I have for a long time now, I call myself a Jewish atheist, which might be a strange concept. You might say, how can you be Jewish and an atheist? Let me briefly explain. So I am not religious, I don't believe in God, but I'm culturally Jewish. And probably this doesn't exist that much in Indonesia, not that many Jews. I know quite a few Muslims in the West who call themselves Muslim atheists. Now, maybe there are some in Indonesia who calls that too. I'm guessing it's a small minority. But certainly in the West, it's increasingly common now, the idea that you have not a religious belief, you don't believe in God, you don't believe in a higher power, however you describe the religion. But there is some affinity, I feel, with Judaism culturally and historically, and in some ways my whole life is not defined by writing about Israel-Palestine. However, I feel a moral responsibility to write about this question because Israel claims to speak in my name, and in fact does speak in my name. When Netanyahu was the Prime Minister of Israel, it's nothing to do with me. I didn't vote for the guy. I think he's a war criminal who should be in The Hague. But he says almost like, I am the leader of the Jews of the world. It's an absurd statement. And to me, it's vital that people around the world, including in Indonesia and elsewhere, realize that so many people look at what Israel is doing with disgust and are appalled and are shamed that that's being associated with our religion.
Mhm, mhm. Jadi kalau ditanya dia itu apa, dia Jewish atheist gitu, dan dia nggak yakin konsep itu masuk gitu ya di Indonesia. But they may surprise you. Maybe there are some Muslim atheists
Totally,
here, Christian atheist, Hindu atheist. We don't know. We're just not very open about it with the communist scare, like communist history, anti-communist history. So probably that concept relates well to some people here. So anywho. Yang ingin dia bilang adalah ketika dia bilang Yahudi itu bukan karena dia religius gitu ya, tetapi itu lebih ke ikatan budaya, ikatan kultural, dan ada banyak hal yang dilakukan oleh Israel yang itu menjijikkan, dan dia tidak suka bahwa itu dilakukan atas nama kelompok kulturalnya. Jadi itu yang ingin dia garis bawahi. Actually, if I may go back to what you said before, that the younger generation has more explicit support towards Palestine. I mean, I work with Gen Z. I teach at the university. Everyone there is Gen Z, and I have to admit that I owe, or like a lot of us owe them, the language. Because I think before it was so difficult, especially and including for Muslims in Indonesia, to express solidarity towards Palestine, because it will immediately be seen as anti-Semitic. But thanks to a lot of Gen Zs who can decouple, support towards Palestine and being anti-Semitic, I think a lot of people now found the language. So thank you, Gen Z. Online and here, thank you Gen Z all around the world who managed to decouple those issues. Teman-teman kerasa ya, dulu susah gitu loh mau bilang pro Palestina karena gampang banget dibilang anti Semitik, padahal kan nggak begitu ya. Kita mendukung kemerdekaan Palestina bukan berarti kita benci orang Yahudi atau yang lain-lain. Yang kita benci adalah penjajahan siapapun di muka bumi ini.
And it's worth saying just on that one of the things that I've been talking about and opposing for years, which is not directly related to this book, just more in general, is the danger of weaponizing anti-Semitism. Meaning that anti-Semitism is used as a weapon to silence you, to shame you, to say, how dare you criticize Israel, you're an anti-Semite. How dare you challenge what Israel is doing? How dare you challenge what a Jewish leader may have said about Arabs or Palestinians or Muslims or whatever? And of course, anti-Semitism is real. It's a problem. Actual Jew hatred, it's a growing problem, in fact, as is Islamophobia, hatred of Muslims. All that is undeniably getting worse. I'm not denying any of that. Not in Indonesia probably, but certainly in much of the West. I'm well aware of that, and I often fight that fight myself. And with others, but what worries me is that deliberate conflation between Judaism and Zionism. Now, this room might understand the difference, so let me just very quickly explain. So Judaism is the religion. We believe in, you're Jewish. I mean, obviously, I call myself Jewish, but don't believe in God, so it's a bit complicated. But in general, if you're a Jew, you're born of the Jewish faith, or you convert and you generally believe in God, or in my case, not. But that's the Jewish faith. Zionism is the belief that Jews have the right to a homeland. Now, the question is where that homeland is. Now, obviously, it's currently in Palestine, but certainly when Zionism was founded, there was talk about it being in a range of other places. It's sort of crazy to imagine this now, but early Zionist thinkers were talking about from the late 1800s, imagined it could have been somewhere like Argentina, parts of Australia. I mean, it seems nuts to think about that now, the idea of having a Jewish state in Argentina or in Tasmania, which is a state of my country, Australia. Seems bonkers. But it ended up being in Palestine, and of course when Israel was founded in 1948, it was founded on the bones and death of about 20,000 Palestinians who were ethnically cleansed for the sake of a Jewish state, because much of the West felt either guilty or responsible for Jews after the Holocaust. And one of the things that I was told when I was growing up was that, as I said before, that Israel is what keeps us safe. But actually, and this has been the case for arguably all the time, Israel is what's making us more unsafe. That it's more unsafe to be a Jew today in Israel than arguably anywhere else in the world. Now, what does that say to you about the supposed usefulness of a Jewish state, where if you, as a country, occupy and kill and torture Palestinians for decades, you can't be that surprised that a lot of people don't really like you.
Jadi tadi Antony pengen menggarisbawahi Yahudi dan Zionisme adalah dua hal yang berbeda. Yahudi itu soal agama, soal kepercayaan, soal keyakinan. Sementara Zionisme adalah bayangan bahwa atau paham bahwa orang-orang Yahudi itu punya hak terhadap homeland atau tanah tertentu yang tadi. Bisa nggak sih bayangin gimana kalau tanahnya tuh di Argentina aja atau di Tasmania atau enggak ya. Tahun 1948 penjajah Inggris dan kekuatan-kekuatan dunia lain memutuskan ya tempatnya di Palestina. Ada kelompok etnis yang disingkirkan, ada ethnic cleansing dengan premis bahwa keberadaan sebuah negara Israel untuk kaum Yahudi adalah yang akan membuat orang-orang Yahudi ini safe, aman gitu ya, setelah menjalani atau setelah mengalami Holocaust sebelumnya. Tapi satu hal yang dia tekankan di buku ini adalah enggak begitu, itu propaganda doang gitu. Jadi justru karena ada negara Israel, maka orang-orang Yahudi termasuk dan terutama yang tinggal di Israel itu menjadi sangat tidak aman. Hidup mereka menjadi jauh lebih terancam. Jadi premis bahwa kalau kita punya negara buat kita sendiri, kita aman nih di dalam sini, itu justru keliru karena teman-teman Yahudi yang ada di negara Israel itu justru yang paling tidak aman dibandingkan yang tinggal di tempat lain.
That sounds like a great translation. Thank you.
Or exaggeration.
Who knows?
I don't know. Those, right?
Who knows? Yeah.
So yeah, do you want to, start outlining if there's one or two things that you want them to leave this talk with? What would those be?
When I started researching this book, I guess I started researching it in a way about 10 years ago. I wasn't writing the book then, but I started researching it about 10 years ago. I was living, as I said, I started going to Palestine, Israel in 2005, and I would go every 3 or 4 years as a journalist. I would go to Israel, the West Bank and Gaza to report. But I moved there in 2016 to East Jerusalem with my partner. She was working for an NGO, for Oxfam. And I was a journalist, a freelance journalist, and started writing or investigating these questions of the Israeli arms industry. Now, the arms industry could be seen as quite dry. I mean, it's nothing that gets a lot of attention, at least then, in the international press, which I thought was a problem. But when you realize, as I did over time, that the only way that Israel can maintain its occupation, the longest occupation in modern times, is a whole suite of weapons and surveillance technology, which is tested first on Palestinians in Palestine, and it's then sold to the world, to, I estimate, about 140 countries as so-called battle tested. So even if you think, and maybe this room does not, but even if one thinks that who cares about the Palestinians, they're very far away from here, it's the other side of the world, we've got our own problems here. Yes, of course there are problems in Indonesia like any country. But as I often talk about in the book, and this is what I would hope people think and take away, what happens in Palestine doesn't stay there. This is being exported around the world. So what's being exported? Yes, the weapons and surveillance technology, which can be used against dissidents or journalists or critical thinkers, or in Indonesia's case, West Papuan activists, whoever it may be. But it's more than that. Israel is exporting more than just the physical, tangible technology. They're also exporting two things. The concept of getting away with it, impunity, which many countries look to Israel with admiration. How do you get away with it? This has been going on long, talking about before October 7. So long. No sanction, no pressure really you're basically able to get away with it. And secondly, and I'll finish on this point, what I see more and more happening is that Israel is becoming a model for the global far right. So when you have protests of the far right who are historically anti-Islam, anti-immigration, anti-diversity, usually anti-women, anti-gay rights, anti-pretty much anything, protesting in London or Sydney or New York or wherever it may be, or across Europe, it's pretty strange these days to often see these protests marching with the Israeli flag. Now you might think, hang on, how is it that the far right party or group would admire Israel? But what they're admiring in Israel is the ethno-nationalist model, a proudly Jewish supremacist racist state that discriminates against non-Jews. Now, a far right thug in Sweden, for example, doesn't want to have a Jewish state in Sweden. He or she wants a Christian ethno-state in Sweden. And often these parties say that. It's not a secret. But what's more disturbing is Israel's embracing those groups. They see that as a mutually agreeable alliance. So the idea that a Jewish state would partner with often violent racists, including, and we'll talk about this, in India, where India is run these days by Prime Minister Modi, who's a Hindu fundamentalist. Now, India is doing what it's doing for its own reasons. It's not doing it because of Israel. However, yes, they're selling weapons to each other, but it's actually more than that. They're selling this idea, in both cases, of admiring each other's racism. Israel admires India's racism against Muslims, and India admires Israel's racism against Arabs. I mean, they don't say it quite in those words, but that's essentially what it means. And India is the biggest country in the world, biggest population, hugely influential now. And that, to me, should worry us deeply.
Oke, kalau buat kita di Indonesia mungkin alasan bersolidaritas dengan Palestina itu cukup jelas ya, kenapa gitu. Tapi di banyak tempat lain nggak seotomatis itu gitu, karena apa sih Palestina jauh, gue nggak kenal, agamanya beda gitu. Nah, buku ini ingin bilang salah satunya solidaritas dengan Palestina tuh nggak harus selalu didasarkan kepada hal yang moral, pada ikatan-ikatan identitas yang sama, tapi juga bisa didasarkan pada hal yang lebih praktis, yaitu apa yang terjadi di Israel itu sebetulnya adalah percobaan untuk kemudian dilakukan juga di banyak negara di dunia. Ada setidaknya 140 negara di mana teknik-teknik yang dilakukan oleh Israel di Palestina itu dicobakan juga gitu. Jadi kalau kita biasanya what happens in this room stays in this room, itu enggak what happens in Palestine done by Israel gets exported elsewhere gitu. Nah, yang diekspor itu apa gitu? Paling nggak ada 3 hal yang jelas, yang paling kelihatan itu tentu saja persenjataan dan pengintaian ya. Jadi weapons and surveillance technology sudah dicobakan, makanya judulnya Laboratorium Palestina, sudah dicobakan di Palestina. Oh, berhasil tuh bisa membedakan orang yang begini begitu, bisa dengan precise melakukan ABCD gitu. Jadi sudah dicobakan dan kemudian ini diekspor ke mana-mana. Tetapi yang lebih mengerikan dan nggak banyak dari kita bicarakan adalah 2 yang lain, yaitu impunitas. Ada loh negara bisa menjajah, bisa melakukan ethnic cleansing dan segala macam, dibiarin sama negara lain gitu. Kalau ada diktator lain atau pemimpin sayap kanan lain tuh mereka semua ini ya hormat Bang Jago gitu kan, yang wah gila dia bisa ya melakukan ini semua dan nggak dihukum, masih dianggap sebagai negara yang berhak jadi anggota PBB dan lain-lainnya. Mereka jadi belajar gimana sih caranya bisa melakukan itu tanpa dicerca oleh negara-negara lain. Dan yang lain juga, yang ketiga, apa yang dilakukan Israel menjadi model bagi kelompok-kelompok sayap kanan yang ada di seluruh penjuru dunia. Tadi sempat disebut India, tetapi ada juga a lot of them. There's also Hungary, there's also a lot of places, banyak juga di Eropa. Amerika Serikat juga gitu ya. Jadi semua orang ingin menjadi gitu kan. Mereka terinspirasi, ada nih ternyata model etnonasionalis, bisa ya bikin negara etnonasionalis, dan itu membuat kita bisa mencapai banyak hal, melanggar banyak aturan tanpa harus dihukum. Risetnya, I just want to tell them about when this book came to fore. Jadi risetnya dimulai 10 tahun yang lalu. Dia dan pasangannya tinggal di East Jerusalem. Pasangannya bekerja untuk NGO Oxfam, dia bekerja sebagai jurnalis, dan kemudian meneliti ada banyak industri persenjataan yang itu menopang negara Israel, bukan cuman menjadikan teknologi itu ada untuk menjadikan negaranya aman, tetapi itu juga basis ekonomi yang kemudian ketika diekspor dan macam-macam menopang keberadaan negara itu. Versi bahasa Inggris dari buku ini terbit tahun 2023 sebelum Oktober berdarah atau apapun yang kita istilahnya ya, jadi sebelum Oktober gitu. Nah, ini silver liningnya, buku ini terbit 2 tahun setelahnya, 2,5 tahun setelahnya, tapi sudah ada tambahan soal apa yang terjadi antara Oktober 2023 sampai sekarang. Jadi nggak harus selalu iri, buku baru dari luar negeri keluar kapan ya diterjemahin bahasa Indonesia, ternyata telat 2,5 tahun mendatangkan bonus buat kita. So, what was the most difficult thing for you to palate, or like to understand or to sell towards others, this idea that then you put in the book?
You know, one of the things when I write as a journalist, and as you said in your introduction, I've written books and done films on lots of other subjects which are not just about Palestine, on disaster capitalism, on the war in Afghanistan when the US and the West was occupying, on the war on drugs. And in all those other works, one of the things that I always think is important as a journalist, knowing where I'm from, knowing my privilege, knowing the necessary role I think that critical journalism needs to take, which is, it's a cliche, but not just giving voice to those who often haven't got it, but actually acknowledging the fact that so much of Western media is really amplifying power, not challenging it. So in the last 2 years, if anyone has followed at least some of the conversations around Western media coverage of Gaza, Israel's genocide, with some exceptions, the vast majority of it has been bloody terrible. Deferring often to Israeli claims, not believing Palestinian points of view, accepting Israeli lies when, for example, Israel kills about 270 Palestinian journalists and suggesting that maybe, as Israel says, they were terrorists when there's no evidence for that. Behaviour that most Western journalists would not have if it was, for example, a war in, let's say, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which was an illegal war, started in February 2022, and Russia was and continues to commit war crimes. The language that the Western press uses to describe that conflict is very, very different. There's no need to defer to Russian claims. Yes, Russia might deny something, sure, that might go in a story, but it wouldn't go in a headline. Whereas, for example, I was thinking a few months ago, there was a well-known Palestinian journalist, Anas al-Sharif, who worked for Al Jazeera, who was based in Gaza. And Reuters, the well-known Western news organization, I can't remember the exact words, but the headline was something like, Israel kills alleged journalist who they say was a terrorist. I mean, something just insane like that, which you would never have if it was, for example, an Israeli journalist killed. You would never have it if it was a Ukrainian journalist. But something, and this, I guess, goes to the heart of what so much of the problem with my profession is in the West, Arab, Muslim, Palestinian life is not viewed the same way as white, Christian, or even Jewish life is. I'm not saying all journalists, I'm not saying all media outlets, I'm saying in general, there is a double standard, there is racism, there's dehumanization, and it causes many people, including me, to be not just disillusioned with my colleagues or my profession, but feel the need to contribute to working in independent media to try to, I don't know, to try to provide a different perspective, whether it's almost like atoning for that kind of misbehavior.
Jadi tadi apa sih yang paling berat bagi Antony ketika menulis buku ini atau menyampaikan idenya dan segala macam? Buat dia katanya yang paling berat adalah mengakui bahwa media mainstream atau sebagian besar media penting di dunia ini justru mengamplifikasi kebohongan Israel gitu ya. Di dunia yang dia geluti, jurnalisme yang harusnya itu didekati dengan pikiran yang kritis, orang justru bersikap rasis, mendehumanisasi dan pakai standar ganda gitu untuk melihat kematian jurnalis Arab atau jurnalis kulit putih atau jurnalis Yahudi gitu. Jadi itu yang di satu sisi membuat dia agak patah hati dengan profesinya, tapi di satu sisi juga jadi bensin, jadi motor gitu untuk dia kemudian bekerja lebih keras, menghadirkan suara-suara yang bukan cuma dilemahkan ya, tetapi suara-suara yang dibungkam, dianggap bohong dan segala macam. Saya punya banyak sekali pertanyaan untuk Antony, tapi karena teman-teman jauh lebih banyak daripada saya, kayaknya saya akan mulai dari pertanyaan teman-teman dulu gitu. Silahkan disampaikan dalam bahasa apapun, nanti terus kita lihat gimana alur diskusi kita malam ini. Udah ada yang punya pertanyaan belum? 1, 2, oke. Silahkan. Kayaknya harus pakai mic ya supaya teman-teman yang ada di YouTube bisa dengar juga. Aku jalan ke sana Mas, tunggu. Atau ini dioper?
Tes. Halo. Oke. Thank you. Good evening.
Hello.
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 Oh yeah, let me introduce myself. Afkar. Saya Afkar. Maybe I will give give question in bahasa Indonesia. Saya baru baca sekilas dari buku ini. Itu bagaimana ini dengan jelas secara eksplisit gitu ya di subjudulnya itu bahwa bisnis senjata Israel yang melanggengkan neokolonialisme di seluruh dunia gitu. Bahwa Israel melakukannya gitu, melakukan dari segi bisnis dan ekonomi. Terus juga sempat melihat tuh kalau nggak salah beberapa spoiler gitu, dan saya baca sekilas spoiler juga di media sosial tentang bahwa ada banyak negara yang mengimpor senjata gitu dari Israel, bahkan taktik-taktik itu di Indonesia gitu ya. Gimana? Oke. Nah, ketika mention tentang weapon industry, di sini yang sejauh yang saya baca itu adalah tentang terkait impornya dari senjatanya, tapi belum membahas tentang bagaimana sumber dayanya seperti nikel, bagaimana Israel itu bisa mengakses hal tersebut, dan bagaimana sebenarnya neokolonialisme mungkin Israel juga lakukan terhadap mungkin negara-negara yang jadi sumber daya seperti Kongo atau segala macam. Itu sih mungkin aku ingin melihat cerita itu dan bagaimana mungkin itu juga melibatkan praktik neokolonialisme juga oleh Israel sendiri. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Mumpung mic-nya di luar, tadi ada satu lagi angkat tangan. Mungkin sekalian ya.
Oh ya.
While the mic is there, we'll just like take
Cek.
questions.
Sebelum saya bertanya, ini pesanan dari kasir. Tadi yang pesan kopi sastra sama teh panas. Oh iya, kopi sastra siapa? Kopi sastra? Tadi sudah bayar soalnya, sudah bayar. Mana? Oh iya, sorry. Ya, oke. Itu di depan dua-dua, di depan semuanya. Oke. Selamat malam Mbak Dia. Good night, Antony. Introduce myself. My name is BUKU. I'm an atheist too, Indonesian atheist.
Welcome.
Same with you.
Welcome to the club.
Okay. This is difficult to be an atheist in Indonesia.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I haven't read your book until page 214 maybe. This is give me a nightmare. Oh no, not nightmare. This is real. This is give me fear to voices in everywhere. And then that I want to ask to you how deep Indonesia involved to dirty market, this dirty market. Okay, just this is I want to know. Thank you. Okay.
Yes, yes, please.
Oke, so two excellent questions. Terima kasih buat pertanyaannya. Tadi yang pertama Kak Afkar, he just read, he just, you know, saw the first page and already got the spirit of the book, and he would like to push further, asking whether the neocolonialism that you're talking here is just about like the export of weaponries, of surveillance technologies and such, or also the raw materials from which those weapons, those surveillance tools are made. And I think this ties very nicely to Coco's question, where is Indonesia in this whole story?
Yes. Thank you for both those questions. Well, the first question is, my answer would be this, that Israel is not just selling weapons and missiles. It is selling those, missile defense shields, drones, increasingly artificial intelligence, warfare, technology. They're selling all that, but that's hardware or sometimes even software. But in fact, what Israel is wanting, and often is either buying or selling, is so-called friendship, transactional friendship, which I'd say it's not really real friendship, but more than that, influence. Israel is a population of 10 million people. It's a tiny country. It's the 8th biggest arms dealer in the world. In 2024, the latest figures we have, Israel made just under $15 billion from weapons sales. The biggest market was Europe. Arab countries are buying it, Asian countries, I'll get to Indonesia in a minute, and many others. And there's the good chance that when the figures come out for this year, which will be, we'll find out next year, they'll be even higher again. So yes, Israel is involved in various extractive industries, both within, not so much within Israel, but globally, yes. There are certain Israeli businessmen who are involved in the procurement of a lot of the horrible mines in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, are run and owned by Israelis. But that to me is not the main reason why Israel's doing it. That's no defense of those industries at all. They're horrible. But what Israel is doing, as I said, is not just selling the weapons, it's selling both the ideas. Israel is selling increasingly a model. And that's not something necessarily you sell for money, but that is the way that increasingly Israel views the world and views itself. There's a quote I have in the book from, I think it was Netanyahu many years ago, where essentially he's, if the future of, actually maybe it wasn't, sorry, I think it was Obama, was talking about how the world is going to be either looking in the future more like Netanyahu's vision, or it's going to look more like someone like an Obama's vision. And the fact is that Netanyahu's vision is winning out for now. I mean, I think Obama's vision wasn't that fantastic, but putting that issue aside, the vision at the moment increasingly is the world is moving to a more authoritarian future. Huge amounts of extractive industries are becoming the norm, including in your country, in Indonesia and elsewhere. So more and more nations, not just governments, but the people in those countries. The US elected Donald Trump. Many, many European nations are moving to the far right. England elected a Labour Party a year ago, but the far right is knocking at the door. So I'm not saying it's inevitable that the world's about to turn fascist. I don't mean that, but it seems more and more likely that it will be. And that brings us to our old friend Indonesia. So I talk about this in the book, not extensively, but a little bit, that during the Suharto era in 1965, when Suharto took power, and committed a genocide against his own people, Israel was a good friend of Suharto for a long time. Israel was happy to the US's role was far greater. As people in this audience will probably know, the US was literally providing names of so-called communists to the Indonesians who would then be murdered. So 500,000 to 1 million Indonesians were killed, hugely helped by the US and frankly my country, Australia, as well, deeply shamefully. And Israel's role was they were keen to partner with Indonesia for trade, to make friends, to make money off it. Now you fast forward to today, in 2025, and you have an Indonesian president who seems very keen to flirt with Israel, potentially make an arrangement with Israel, potentially consummate his love affair with Israel, who seems very keen to normalize relations with Israel. And what that would mean practically is two things. One, it would definitely mean that Indonesia would have far more Israeli weapons and surveillance technology used against all of you, dissidents, human rights workers, critics, activists in Papua, etc. And secondly, what would it say that the world's biggest Muslim country, the fourth biggest country in the world, after, or really during, a genocide against principally Muslims in Palestine, they think this is the right time to recognize Israel. And suffice to say, it's not the right time to recognize Israel after what it has been doing. And it seems to me that Indonesia, or at least Prabowo's so-called vision, is a desire to be closer to Washington, a desire to be closer to Trump, and thinks that that path goes via Israel. And it seems to me that when you have a president who, was it 2-3 weeks ago, said that Suharto was a national hero, which did not get, as far as I could tell, enough attention internationally. It certainly should have in the media. That says all you need to know about that man's vision, which is a very, very dark authoritarian one. And finally on that point, his own record before he became president, both in East Timor and West Papua, is a deeply, not just unresolved, but he has been accused credibly of profound human rights abuses and war crimes. And that to me needs to be dealt with before anyone like him puts forward a vision for partnering with Israel, a nation that commits genocide against Palestinians.
Jadi menjawab Kak Afkar tadi, betul Israel tidak hanya mengekspor senjata dan alat pengintaian, praktek ekstraksi dan praktek bisnisnya itu nggak cuma di senjatanya tetapi juga di raw materialnya. Tetapi yang menjadi fokus dari buku ini adalah ekspor paling penting adalah model atau ide bahwa bisa loh bikin sebuah negara etnonasionalis yang rasis, yang menyingkirkan semua orang yang berbeda tapi tetap tidak kehilangan teman. Gitu ya. Jadi yang lebih penting di sini ekspor impor yang sebetulnya lebih berharga tetapi tidak mendapatkan perhatian orang adalah persahabatan, adalah aliansi gitu. Nah, tadi nyambung ke pertanyaannya Kak Koko, apa tadi namanya soal Indonesia. Nah, Indonesia mah dari dulu sudah menjadi teman Israel gitu ya. Genosida 1965 terjadi dan dia kesal sekali karena bantuan negara dia dan tentu saja bantuan Amerika Serikat gitu. Tetapi kemudian seiring dengan peristiwa tersebut, hubungan antara Indonesia melalui Presiden Soeharto waktu itu dengan Israel menguat gitu. Soeharto yang baru saja dijadikan pahlawan, dan sekarang presiden yang sekarang juga ingin mengakui ya, siap untuk mengakui meskipun agak halus ngomongnya, dihalus-halusin gitu, siap mengakui negara Israel, padahal negara tersebut sedang melakukan I think it's the first live tweeted genocide, dan negara Muslim terbesar itu siap untuk mengakui eksistensi negara Israel di tengah ini semua. Nah, artinya ekspor yang paling hebat itu sebetulnya ide, model. Bisa loh ada negara yang melakukan semua ini tetapi tetap menjadi teman semua orang, tetap menjadi pemasok rasa aman bagi semua negara. Tadi dua hal yang ingin dia garis bawahi adalah pertemanan Indonesia dengan Israel itu yang pertama membuat kita warga negara, terutama teman-teman di Papua, teman-teman oposisi, teman-teman aktivis HAM itu makin diintai oleh negara kita karena dapat tadi bantuan teknologi persenjataan dan lain-lain. Dan yang kedua tadi ya bisa-bisanya gitu negara Muslim terbesar di dunia siap untuk mengakui keberadaan Israel di tengah genosida yang sedang ada. Jadi kekuatan terbesar adalah ide, ekspor terbesar, terpenting, dan yang nggak pernah dibicarakan orang di luar sana, makanya dia garis bawahi di buku ini adalah ide dan model. Aduh, makin lama makin sedih dan marah. Ada pertanyaan lain nggak? Silakan. Oke. Antrean ya. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oke, nanti kita dengar nomor 1 dulu, nanti nomor 2, 3, 4, 5. Kalau ada yang pertanyaannya dekat ke situ bisa langsung dulu, jadi nggak harus urut antriannya banget. Tapi nomor 1 silakan. Iya, mau nggak jadi nomor 1?
Thank you. My name is Haris. I want to ask Antony directly. So I'm really interested with your idea about that Israel is not just exporting tangible like weapons and something like that, but also intangible like impunity. You said about that. But we know historically that it is not just Israel that doing genocide into doing this genocide. For example, like Germany, Nazi Germany back then, also doing genocide to Jewish. So I haven't read your book, but I'm interested with your idea, and I want to ask something. Why is it? Take example from Nazi Germany. Why is it the Nazi Germany can be crushed? It means like the power of Nazi Germany can be crushed, but historically, so we don't see any, at least yes, it is neo-Nazism, but we don't see any big Nazism anymore. But it is not the case for Israel, at least until today. Why is it the case? So what kind of social, historical, political, or economy conjuncture that makes Israel impunity, at least until today, still exists? What do you think about that? Thank you.
Teman-teman yang antrean 2, 3, 4, 5 tadi ada yang pertanyaannya mirip nggak? Kalau mirip biar sekalian. 3, 4, 5 nggak ada? Kalau nggak, nomor 2, terus nanti dia dijawab dulu ya. Silakan.
Good evening. My name is Tatak. I just want to say that this is very ironic that the victims of fascism in the past becoming the model of fascism today. But then my question is that to what extent do you think that Israel being the influence, the main influence for the rise of fascism and far-right movement today? Thank you.
Answer those.
Yes.
Look, the situation obviously with Nazi Germany on the one hand was a different time in history. Clearly, after 1933, when Hitler took power, many Western states and elites, in fact, wanted to side with Hitler. They weren't actually against him at all because they had a deep antipathy and racism towards Jews themselves. Obviously, eventually Nazi Germany started invading countries in Europe. The English went to war with them, and then the Americans got involved after Pearl Harbor, and of course they were defeated in 1945. I mean, you didn't say this, but I guess the implication is, why hasn't there been more or any, say, military action or even a intervention force in Israel to help Palestinians? And one of the things I think that's very clear around how Israel has essentially gotten away with it for so long is for a range of reasons. I think it's partly to do, I'm talking about in the West, that in the last 2 years you have a situation where England, the US, UK, much of the West, Australia, my country, has continued to support Israel, defend it, arm it, back it, with very little dissent. I mean, dissent in the population, but not with the governments. I think it's for a range of reasons. I don't think it's for one particular. I think, and this is in no particular order, I think racism plays a factor. There's a deep, profound racism in the Western elite circles towards Arabs, Palestinians and Muslims. I guarantee you, if there was even a possibility of 60, 70, 80, 90,000 Jews being killed, God forbid, there would have been a Western military intervention before it happened. Whereas with Palestinians, well, their blood is cheap. That's not said, but that's the clear implication. I think there's a lot of what I would call Holocaust guilt that still exists in Western circles. Not that someone alive today had mostly anything to do with the Holocaust, of course, most of those people have now died, but in terms of the fact that the perception, rightly or wrongly, was that the world didn't do enough to save the 6 million Jews who were killed. And I think thirdly, Israel plays a very key central role in Western hegemony and control in the Middle East. They are vital to have a key US military base in the Middle East. They're able to often control, through various means, military and financial means, Arab states. Egypt and Jordan are essentially client states of the US and Israel. Looks like Saudi Arabia might be joining soon. Israel is now the most powerful nation in the Middle East. That was not the case maybe 3 years ago. Now it certainly is. And a lot of Western states find that very attractive, very appealing. I think the role of the pro-Israel lobby clearly is a factor in many Western states, putting pressure on journalists and media and others, politicians, taking journalists and politicians to Israel on free lobby trips to show them the supposed glories of Israeli democracy. I mean, it's bullshit, but that's what they show them. I think it's all those reasons. And the only way that this situation will change in time, in this situation meaning the endless occupation of Palestine, is outside pressure. Economic strangulation of Israel is the only way. There's a historical precedence for this that happened with apartheid South Africa. The West did not invade South Africa in the 1990s. They said to South Africa, after decades of horrific apartheid against black South Africans, you are economically isolated, you either change or we're going to make that economic pain worse. There was a cultural boycott, there was a sports boycott. That is what needs to happen here in many, many countries. The second, for your question, I don't think, to be clear, Israel's the only model for the global fascist resurgence. They're not. The global far-right movement, which is not particularly always organised between country after country, whether it's Trump, whether it's Le Pen in France, whether it's the AfD in Germany, they are surging for a range of reasons, for growing antipathy towards Islam, a growing economic insecurity, which of course doesn't give justification to the far right, but that's often the line that is used to get support for the far right. Israel becomes that model. And as I did a film recently for Al Jazeera called Germany's Israel Obsession, which you can find on YouTube. It's for free. This came out in September actually. And essentially what that film was looking at, I'm Australian, but I'm also German. I'm a dual citizen. I have a German passport. And the film essentially looks at why Germany has become so fanatically pro-Israel, inverted commas, pro-Israel. Because of history, because of, in their case, Holocaust guilt, and it's leading to profound racism against Arabs, Palestinians, and Muslims. And there's a line in that film by a woman who says essentially Israel allows the far right to launder their image. It's like a washing machine, because the far right will say, as they do, well, you can't accuse me of anti-Semitism. I love Israel. What are you talking about? Right? I mean, it's bullshit. But this is what country after country after country. And what's disturbing is that Israel welcomes that support. It's bad enough the far right exists and is rising in popularity. But the fact that Israel welcomes that support, embraces that support, invites that Israel's image moving forward. And when you are partnering as a Jewish state with white supremacists, you've gone a little bit wrong somewhere, to put it mildly.
Very mildly. Oke, biar nggak kehilangan momentum, kayaknya langsung 3, 4, 5 dulu ya. Nggak perlu di ini dulu toh, dirangkum langsung 3, 4, 5 ya.
Good evening, Antonio. My name is Rizky, and my question is, I will move to Saudi Arabia. I will stay on Madinah, and my question is, Saudi Arabia support Israel or just quiet, not act to support Palestine, or Saudi Arabia has no power because it's the #1 country for Islamic, but I don't see Saudi Arabia to support Palestine. So how about Saudi Arabia respond about genocide? And #2, pakai bahasa aja, Putin dan Trump pernah ke tembok ratapan. Apakah itu untuk suara dari orang Yahudi? Apakah karena orang-orang Zionis Israel ini adalah semacam elit global? Jadi Amerika dan Rusia pun bahkan ikut ke tembok ratapan. Apakah itu artinya tidak ada yang bisa menghentikan Israel dari genosida? Apakah memang yang bisa menghentikan Israel adalah orang Israel itu sendiri? Dan yang ketiga, Gus Dur pernah ingin membuat hubungan diplomatik dengan Israel. Apakah itu pilihan yang bagus atau buruk? Last but not least, a good Zionist is a dead Zionist. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'll answer the one about Saudi Arabia first. I mean, the sad reality is that, yeah, I mean, the vast majority of Arab elites for decades have never supported Palestinians. Hate Palestinians, treat them with contempt. I'm not suggesting, which there are a lot of Palestinians living in Jordan and Egypt. They live there as second-class citizens. Saudi Arabia could be, I mean, it's obviously it's a theocracy. It's not a democracy. Could be a very powerful player on this question. Could be a good advocate for Palestine. They are not, and they will not be. And the obvious question I often get is, why are so many Arab Muslim elites around the world so terrible on this question? Where are they? Where are they? I mean, I would argue, where are the Indonesian elites? I mean, it's the biggest Muslim country in the world right here. Where are they? I'm not saying there's no Muslims here who care. Of course there are. I'm talking about at the political level. Where are they? Where is their voice? Where is their voice at the UN? Where is that voice? And if you ask most Palestinians in Palestine, or even in the diaspora in the West, how they view the leaders of Saudi and Jordan and Egypt, they will tell you with honesty, we treat them with the contempt that they deserve. They are not coming to help us. They have not helped us in 80 years, let alone what's happened in the last 2 years. Where are they? None of them have cut ties with Israel, and in fact the opposite. They've deepened military ties with Israel. They are buying surveillance technology from Israel to monitor their own citizens because they're scared of them. Technology which is tested on Palestinians first. So this is the Arab world is not coming, when I say the Arab world, the Arab elites, the Arab leaders, Arab dictators, they are not coming to help the Palestinians. And that leaves the Palestinians in a pretty bad situation. They would be an obvious ally They are in the region, they are in the Middle East, these are fellow Arabs. Where is that solidarity? There are many Arabs within these countries who deeply feel support for Palestine. That's different. But they are suppressed by living in dictatorships, backed and armed by the US. So it's kind of a mess. And Saudi is not going to be helping the Palestinians at all.
Jadi bukan karena nggak mau, bukan karena diem aja, tapi memang mereka sendiri nggak suka. Apa sih namanya? They feel contempt towards orang-orang Palestina yang ada di situ.
And if Indonesia recognizes Israel, the other Muslim countries that have not recognized Israel may well choose to follow. They say, well, Indonesia has recognized Israel. It's the biggest Muslim country in the world. I guess we should follow. We might get some benefits from Washington or Israel as well. And this is where, yet again, and it leaves Palestinians in a very precarious position. Where is their support coming from? Public opinion in the world is undeniably on their side, including in the West now, including in many parts of the US. And that's vital, but it's not yet at the political level in general. I mean, the only silver lining to that is Zoran Mamdani, the man who won the mayor's race in New York. Now, he's not US president, but the fact that someone like him with his views can win in New York, and his whole campaign was not just about Palestine, it was mostly about affordability in New York being crazily expensive, which it is. But the fact that he had anti-Zionist views, pro-Palestine views, years ago would have killed a candidate like that. I don't mean literally killed, but it would have killed his chances. And he won, overwhelmingly. And that to me is a little sign of hope, a little sign of hope.
So, a couple of questions that were there. Rizky pointed out that Putin and Trump, when they visited Israel, they went to the wall, right? Was that just, to gather votes back home? Was that something else? What can you tell us about that? And also, would, the dismay of Israel only be achieved through people within Israel who do not believe any longer in this ethno-nationalist state? I think those were the two other things that Rizky wanted to know.
I'll answer them briefly. When Trump goes to Israel, Trump is doing what is good for Trump. That is Trump. Trump doesn't give a shit about anything or anyone apart from himself. He's a thug and a fool and not very intelligent. He's US president, I'm well aware of that. But he's not doing it because he suddenly cares about the Palestinians or even cares about the Israelis for that matter. It's seen as, inverted commas, good politics, as every presidential candidate in the US makes their way to Israel during the US election campaign just to show how much they love Israel. But I suspect what's going to happen at the next election, assuming there is one and Trump doesn't cancel it, is that the Democratic Party, which has been terrible on this, is changing. It is definitely changing. The Democratic Party base does not like Israel, does not want their candidate to support Israel. I don't know how that's going to play out. I have no idea. But it is shifting. Even within the Republicans, it is shifting. So when Putin goes, well, Putin is a thug and a dictator, so he doesn't have to worry about elections because he doesn't have any elections, right? There are no elections, really, in Russia that one takes seriously. Look, leaders go to Israel almost out of either obligation or fealty or deference or wanting to send a message that they like Jewish people, even though, as I said, huge amounts of Jews do not support or think Israel should be a Jewish state. And I've said that for years. I believe in a one-state solution. I had a book out last year called After Zionism, which is about a belief, and I'm not the only one thinking this, one state, one democratic state, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, atheist, whatever you are, living in a democratic state. It sounds radical now because we're so far away from it, but actually it's what democracy should be. It's one state for everyone in there.
Oke, silahkan antrean berikutnya.
Hi, I'm Lydia and I'm a media student. So I'm very interested in how you did your investigation. So my first question is, how can you access all that fascinating data and all that information? Because I haven't finished your book yet, but I find it cool because, like, how can you have that all information, and then how you can make yourself safe during your investigation? Because you said before that so many journalists are killed during the occupation. And the second question, you also said before that like so many Western mainstream media just amplify the Israel narration. So my question is, how then, you said that you are a freelance and independent journalist, so how then you negotiate your own political standpoint with that, all that media ideology industry? So I think that's all.
There are three big questions. I'll try to answer them as best I can. Look, doing an investigation like this takes years. The writing of the book, not the research, the writing of the book took about 9 months. I wrote the book, I guess it would have been in 2022. But the research took years. It doesn't mean I was doing it every day, but it took years to do. How did I get the information? Well, a lot of it is not public. So you need to go, I went to sources within Israel that I knew. There were certain activists who had been trying to get more information about the Israeli arms industry, releasing information about how Israel has dealt with dictatorships over the years, getting information about that. There's often information in the Israeli archives, but they're in Hebrew. I don't read Hebrew, so I needed someone to help me translate that. I would speak to experts on the issue around the world to give me an insight into what's going on. I would speak to victims of Israeli weapons or spyware, which is very much in the book. So there's lots of people in the book who were victims of the use of Pegasus when India used it, or Mexico. And that, I guess, ties into the second question about keeping safe.